Chapter 25. The thumps against the hull increased. The external pickups were mostly blocked by the alien forms as they mindlessly beat against the ship, as if it were alive and they were trying to kill it. Wilkes looked at the others. Billy was sunk into a stunned silence. The crewman was so frightened he had wet himself. Beulah drifted in and out of consciousness. Blake was the only one he could depend on for help. She was the one to guard his back while he went outside to clear the grid. Wilkes smiled wryly. Right, opening the hatch would be fun. They didn't have enough firepower in the APC to keep the things off him long enough to do what had to be done. He'd been too rattled to think earlier. The reasonable thing to do was get the ship into the air again, move it 10 or 15 clicks away from the nest, and deal with the few aliens that hung onto them once they had landed. Except that they didn't have much fuel to play around with here, and a miscalculation would leave them shy of what they needed to reach the ship in orbit. He had locked the Benedict's comp into the nuclear scenario. It wasn't going to be altered from the APC. Couldn't be. He'd wanted to be sure, in case something happened to them. Well, looked like worst had come to worst. Sarge? He looked at Blake. No, going outside isn't real swift. I'm going to take it up again, do a roll, and move as far enough away so that we can put down without company. Blake nodded. Makes sense. If we're light on fuel after that, we'll gut this sucker and toss out everything that adds unnecessary weight. Wilkes worked the controls. The ship trembled, but didn't go anywhere. Oh, shit, he said. Sarge? Either too many of them on us, or they've jammed up the other grids. Looks like we're back to plan A. Metal screeched. Damn. I wouldn't want to bet on us pulling this off, Sarge. Yeah, me neither. I don't see how we have any choice. Listen, Blake, if they get me alive, you punch my lights out, copy? I can't, Sarge, you know that. Oh yeah, right. Never mind, I've got Massey's grenade here. I'll pull my own plug, if it comes to that. Billy. She looked at him, her eyes dull. What? Take this pistol. If we don't come back... She nodded, understanding. The ship rocked, raised up on the starboard side, fell back. Uh-oh, Wilkes said. They're working together. Enough of them will tip us over. Get to the hatch, Blake. She nodded, unslung her plasma rifle, and switched off the safety. The ship rocked again, slammed back into place. Billy, look, I'm sorry for getting you into this. It's okay, Wilkes. I didn't have anything better to do. For a second their gazes locked and they smiled at each other. The borrowed time they'd both been living on was about to expire. Fuck it, Wilkes thought. He took a deep breath. Let's do it. The ship thrummed. A sound unlike anything Wilkes had ever heard washed over them, vibrating every surface in the APC, battering at his ears like padded pugil sticks. He dropped to his knees and clapped his hands over his ears. He felt the vibration to his core. It made the marrow in his bones hum. Christo! The crewman screamed. Abruptly, the sound died. Wilkes stood, shaken. What the hell had that been? Listen, Blake said. I don't hear anything, the crewman said. Wilkes nodded. That's right. The aliens have stopped attacking us. It was as quiet as an isolation chamber. They all looked at Wilkes. Let's take a look, Blake. Wilkes took a couple of deep breaths, then moved to the hatch. He held his carbine ready, Blake with her rifle right behind him. The hatch went up. Oh man, Blake said. Wilkes was speechless. At least 50 of the aliens lay sprawled on the ground around the ship. They looked melted, as if all their edges had run together. Dead. Wilkes didn't doubt it for a second. That was pretty incredible. But what he saw standing a dozen meters away was even more incredible. What the hell is that? Blake said. Wilkes just stared. Some kind of suited figure stood there. It was easily 7 or 8 meters tall, bipedal, with a clear helmet on the E-suit it wore. Wilkes could see the thing's face behind the bubble covering, and it looked like nothing so much as an elephant might appear, were it to evolve to a two-legged animal. It had a pinkish grey skin, a ridged nose or maybe a trunk that vanished in a long chamber down the front of the suit, with what seemed to be a pair of small tentacles, one to either side of the larger trunk. It had a short extension of the suit behind it, and Wilkes guessed that it had a tail in the tube, shaped like a skinny pyramid. A closer look, and Wilkes realized the thing wasn't exactly standing. The heavy boots it wore had a central split, as if the thing had hooves, and they didn't quite touch the ground. It was actually floating, a couple of centimeters above the surface. It was close enough so he could see its eyes. The pupils were shaped like crosses, wider than they were high. They looked dead, those eyes. The thing held a device in its gauntleted hands, and Wilkes could bet 10 years' pay against a toenail clipping it was some kind of weapon. The air was thin, and Wilkes had to take big gulps of it to get enough oxygen. He glanced over and saw that Blake was slowly bringing her rifle around to bear on the thing. "Negative on that," he said softly. "I think this thing just flattened all the local bad guys with whatever that gear is it's holding. I don't want it to think we mean it any harm. If it can knock down that many of those suckers all at once, we're way outgunned here." Blake let her rifle droop to point at the ground. The thing, another alien, and sure as shit not from around here, Wilkes knew, pointed its own weapon downward. "Hello, Spacer," Blake said softly. "You must be new in town." Behind them, Billy screamed in terror. Billy was back on Rim. She was a child, sitting in front of her father's scout hopper, watching the near-featureless grey pass by the observation port. So far, the ride had been dull, but her father had said there was something out there that they had to go look for, and he brought her and her brother Vic along. Her father's assistant, Mr. Zendale, was also there. Her father called him Gene, but she wasn't supposed to call him that, and her mother was there too. "Holy sister of the stars," her father said. "Russ, what is it?" her mother said. "Our detectors just went off the scale. There's something huge down there, in the Valley of the Iron Fingers." "How can that be?" "I don't know, but we're talking about mega tonnage and mixed signal. Got to be man-made. Gene?" "I got it, Russ. Lord, I can't get a configuration ID on it. Look at the specs." It didn't mean anything to Billy, all the numbers and stuff, but she knew it must be important because her parents and Gene, Mr. Zendale, were all excited. "It's shaped like a giant horseshoe." Billy didn't know what that meant. She'd never seen a horse except in EdCom, and that one hadn't been wearing any shoes that she could see. "Gene, Sarah, I think we've got an alien ship here." They landed, and even through the swirling murk, Billy could see what her parents were so excited about. It was like a big U, the ends pointing up at an angle. It was real big. You could put a lot of scout hoppers in it and have room left over. "No match to anything on record," Gene said. He laughed. "How could colony tracking have missed it?" her mother said. "Magnetic interference from the iron, maybe," her father said. "And the weather sats probably didn't footprint this spot. Look, who cares? We found it. We've got salvage rights on it. This might be our ticket back to Earth. It could be worth a fortune." They landed the hopper. Her father and mother and Gene put on e-suits. "You stay here and watch us on the monitor," her father said. "Don't let Vic touch any of the controls. We're going to look at the ship. If you get hungry, there are ration packs in the store box. 1 each. No more, okay?" Billy nodded. "Okay." So then she watched. All three of them had cams on their suits, and she knew how to switch around so she could see from one or the other or all three at once, if she wanted to. At first it was dark. Outside was stormy, like usual, but pretty soon they got into the big ship, and it got better. They had floodlights and turned them on. The inside was spooky, weird. It didn't look like anything Billy had ever seen. It took her parents and Gene a long time to get to the control room, She knew that was where they wanted to go, because she could hear them talking on their suit comms. And when they finally got there, Billy had gone to the toilet twice and already eaten her meal pack, and half of Vic's because he didn't like the green paste and she did. There was a dead thing sitting in the control seat. It was real big, and it looked strange, kind of like Edcom of a big Terran animal they called an elephant. It had a big funny nose, and overall its whole body was as long as 4 men. But it was dead, lying on its back. There was a hole in its stomach or its chest or something, with bones sticking up from the hole. Yuck. Her parents went around the thing a few times, talking to each other and to Jean, and then they went down the hall to a big room. And on the floor of the big room were these things. Billy screamed, and Wilkes was there, holding her by the shoulders, shaking her gently. "Hey, hey, it's all right, we're okay." The memories bubbled in her, and she fought them. But there was a pressure in her brain, a kind of malevolent presence. "Billy, it's that thing out there," she said. "I can read its thoughts, more like its feelings. It's inside my head." Wilkes glanced at Blake. "I'm not crazy," Billy said. "It just killed all the aliens outside our ship, right? Because it hates them. Its kind have been here before. Collecting specimens. Oh God, Billy!" She shook her head, as if that would clear the intrusion by the stranger. "It somehow can feel my thoughts too," she said. "It knows." "Knows what?" On Rim. My parents. What about them?" "Oh God, Wilkes. My parents found a ship there, an alien ship. The pilot was some kind of scientist, maybe. It had been to this world. It had taken specimens of these things. Eggs. It must have been infected, implanted. They killed it. The ship crashed on Rim. The thing survived inside it. I don't know for how long. My parents found it. They went into the ship." Wilkes hugged her. "Easy, kid. Let it go. We know what happened." Billy sobbed. Tears flowed. That was one of the memories she had buried the deepest. Not even the worst of her nightmares had dredged it up before now. Hate filled her brain, but it was not her own emotion. It was from the space traveller floating outside the APC, the giant whose fellow being had died and crashed on Rim. She didn't want to remember, but the space traveller pulled at it, drawing it into view. The child she had been, watching the monitors, watching her father lean over one of the eggs. Seeing, all over again, the opening and the crab-like embryo that flew out and latched onto her father's face. Seeing her mother and Jean drag him out, listening to the screams. "No! Get away from me! Go away!" Hate. Gut-churning black, molten hate, sloshing over and filling Billy to her toes. How this thing hated these creatures. "It saved us," Wilkes said. "Not because it likes us," she said. "Because it can't stand them." Blake said, "Sarge, we've got to get the ship spaceworthy. We've got what, 3 hours?" Billy thought about the bombs that would drop, what would happen to the planet when they did. She felt a sudden interest from the spacesuited figure. It understood her thoughts well enough to hear that message. "The thing is leaving," the crewman said. "Just floating away." "It knows about the bombs," Billy said. "Yeah, well, while I like to be an ambassador to the new species and all, we have to get the APC fixed, or we're going to be atomic dust ourselves." Wilkes stood, leaving Billy sitting on the deck of the little craft. Next to her, Mitch opened his eyes. He didn't speak, and Billy had nothing she wanted to say to him. The alien presence left her, suddenly, a sharp sensation, as if a knife were pulled from her brain. It was hard to breathe. Their eyes burned and their noses ached and dripped, but the repairs took only an hour. The APC lifted, made orbit, and managed a safe rendezvous with the Benedict. Wilkes made very certain there were no unwanted passengers on the APC before he pulled it into the bay, and even then, he had the cleaning lasers scorch every bit of the landing craft's exterior before he let them leave the docking area. Blake plugged Beulah into some kind of life support system designed for androids. The crewman, Billy didn't know his name and didn't care if she ever did, went to do checks on the ship. Wilkes went to do something. He didn't say what. Billy sat at a table, staring at the wall. It was over. They had come to the aliens' world. They had survived pirates and attacks by the creatures. They were about to smash the planet back to a pre-life stage. They were going home. It was all over. And she didn't give a damn.